Welcome to the Susan Brender Show. It's all about you, featuring shows on health and wellness, the performing arts, politics, and people who inspire you to be your very best. And now, here's Susan Brender.
I'm Susan Brender, and this is the Susan Brender Show. Today I have somebody very special on my show. Her name is Lisa Summerour. She became the first African American to become Miss New Jersey USA. Now, can you imagine that? Must have been a fabulous experience for her. She went on to the Miss USA Pageant in Miami, Florida, where she was voted Miss Congeniality. So let's talk to Miss Congeniality on our show. And so I want to welcome Lisa Summerour. And hi, Lisa.
Hi, how are you?
Well, you know something, I always tell this to my guests when they ask me that question. I say, how could I be better when I have somebody like you on the show? I mean,
that I'm stealing that one.
Good. That's what I was hoping you would say. Now, let's talk a little bit about you. Lisa, tell us what your life has been about. You must have had amazing experiences, and the one thing I mentioned that you were the first African American to become Miss New Jersey USA. Now, that must have been extremely fabulous. And what did your family think of it too?
That's a funny. It's not a funny question. It's a funny thought that I just had when you asked what my family thought, because there was a cornucopia of things going on in their mind, ranging from complete and utter disbelief to something more absurd than that. It was exciting. It was something that I never thought I would see myself doing. And I say that because I grew up as an athlete. So I went through high school very involved in sports. I was very good in academics, but I was definitely what they would call a jock. So when I told my family that I was actually entering a pageant, my mother's first response was to break out in hysterical laughter because she thought it was a joke. And I had been kind of talked into entering a pageant because of some coworkers, and it was sort of an in-house joke. It just kind of snowballed into the Miss New Jersey USA pageant. So being there, sitting in the audience, I can still remember the top 10 getting called and the two young ladies sitting on each side of me. We had picked our favorites. We had picked our own top 10 list. None of us were in our own top 10 list. So when my number and name got called, it didn't register initially because that was not, my name wasn't on any of our lists. So it took me a minute. So I guess on some level, I was as surprised as the rest of my family. It didn't occur to me that I could win until I was standing up in the top 5. And then it goes to the top 3, and I had to have this thought. I had this thought go through my mind that says, well, you know what? If you're still standing here at this point, you've got as good a chance of winning this as anybody else. Right. And I think for me, that was when the reality of the moment hit. I don't know at that particular moment that it dawned on me that I was going to be the first black woman to win the title, because at that point I'm still digesting the fact that I'm standing here in a pageant in a gown. There you go. Afterwards, it's obviously a stark reality because it's a historical moment. And my family was flabbergasted to the point where when I finished my walk down the runway, there was no one left in my family in the audience when everybody started. And I didn't know where everyone went. The only person still standing there was my dad. And my dad was standing there with this look on his face. And I said, you know, where did everybody go? Well, my sister went to go buy the video because they weren't buying any of that stuff before because I wasn't going to win. So why were they going to spend money on any of that stuff? My mother and my grandmother had run to the phone. And my dad had decided he was going to stay there in case this was a mistake, and he didn't want me to be there by myself if all of this sort of had to be undone. So he was almost preparing for what we now know as a Steve Harvey moment.
You know, I'll tell you something, Lisa. That's kind of a fun story to tell, but I don't want to stay on this topic for too long, but I do want to kind of ask you about this. You know, there's been a lot of controversy around the whole idea of Miss USA, Miss America, all of those shows, because many people think that it's a way to, unfortunately, do kind of put women on the spot, make women do things they really don't want to do. But for this kind of event, they have no options. They have to kind of expose themselves when they wear bathing suits walking down the runway. Isn't this a little bit of a kind of prejudice in a way? And what's your thoughts about this kind of event?
I actually wrote a paper some years ago on this, and the person I called was Marilyn Seitz, who was my director in the Miss New Jersey USA Pageant at the time, and a very good friend and mentor and like family to me now. And I asked this almost the same question of her. So I think her response will be suitable here, and she won't mind me borrowing it. When she got involved in pageants, it was the 70s, and obviously, women's liberation and feminism have come a long way, and there were lots of people, but she would have people picketing outside of her pageants. And her viewpoint, and I agree with her, is that if women are going to be given the opportunity to make decisions on their own, and this is one of the choices that they have, then they should be able to make these choices and still be supported by those individuals who may not believe in what they're doing, but you can still support a woman in making a decision that might be different from yours. And it's no different than we see male athletes, and we could say that they're being exploited, or we could say that they're taking advantage of a skill or a talent. Running up and down a field or a court, bouncing a basketball in a pair of shorts. I mean, there are a plethora of ways this can be viewed. I understand where people might be coming from, but I also, having been in the pageant industry and meeting a lot of these women, a lot of them are extremely intelligent and they know exactly what it is they're doing. Yeah. And they can benefit in a variety of ways from participating in pageants that have nothing to do with seeking fame and fortune.
Right.
So my take on it is, if we're going to allow women to have the options available to them and the ability to choose for themselves, this is simply one of the myriad of choices that are available to them, and they should have the opportunity to make that choice.
That's a very interesting answer, and I'm glad I asked you that question. Now let's move on. So now, after that, you became a professional actor, and you studied with some of the most interesting people, like Richard Scanlon, from New York City, and you performed with some of the most incredible actors, like Denzel Washington in the film Philadelphia, and Bruce Willis in Mercury Rising, and and Forrest Whitaker, what an actor. Now, what was that like?
Well, I'll tell you, I'm glad you mentioned, and Richard Scanlon was my acting instructor in New York City, and I can't even tell you how much I owe having a career to him, because he literally taught me a good portion of what I learned about the craft initially there, and then Freedom Theater in Philadelphia under some incredible performers and theater instructors there as well. The most asked question by far that I get from anybody, it doesn't matter their age. If it's a woman, the most asked question I get was, what was it like to not work with Denzel Washington, but to have kissed Denzel Washington? And it doesn't matter if I'm talking to someone. It just doesn't matter. It crosses the entire spectrum of age, race, anything. They want to know what that was like. It was wonderful to work with Denzel, and I tell people I didn't really get to kiss him. I was his wife in the movie, so we only got to smooch.
Oh, there you go. Okay, that's, even smooching with him, I think everybody would be jealous about that, because Denzel Washington, oh my God, is he a gorgeous man. But, all right, now, okay, so let's get him, kind of up to this point. So here you are. You start out as a woman in the pageants, and then you go on to be an actor. And the next thing that happens is you have participated for 30 years in direct sales. Now, how do you explain that? Because these are different paths that you've taken, and I'm just curious, why did you participate in sales when you were an actor? Because you would think that you'd want to continue that.
Well, the sales actually came way before the acting. I actually started selling Avon for the mother of a classmate, when I was in 7th or 8th grade. And I just thought it was one of the most fun things in the world that I could help her sell her Avon. I ended up at a very young age having a Avon route. I was still a teenager, maybe 14, 15 years old. I had to have my mom sign for me And I was able to get a 4-block area in our neighborhood where I went door to door, and I was actually the Avon lady. And I would go to meetings with my girlfriend's mother. I've since tried to call them to get copies of the records from when I was working with Avon, and they told me they had a fire or something, and a lot of the old records were destroyed because I just thought it would be a hoot to see what that paperwork looked like. So I went from Avon, and I've done a myriad of different sales companies. And I think what I liked about it was I've always liked the idea of having my own business. And for me, that was an interesting way to be able to do it. I could still do it when I was in college. It almost didn't matter what I was doing outside of that. It was still something that was available to me, but it ended up becoming a part of how I use my acting career now, because I do training and coaching and public speaking and inspirational speaking, and one of the groups that I like to talk to is people who are still in the direct sales industry.
Right. Now, Lisa, this is kind of something I want to know. Now, you became an entrepreneur at an early age. Mm-hmm. What was your inspiration for that, your motivation for that? Because not everybody sees themselves as an entrepreneur. It's not easy to be an entrepreneur. I mean, sometimes you can make a lot of money and sometimes you can't. And so why? Who inspired you to do that? And were your family part of the motivation?
I think in a strange way they were. It wasn't anything intentional. My family didn't have a quote-unquote family-owned business. I had a grandmother who was very creatively talented, so she taught me how to sew. She was a very good seamstress. I became a seamstress, so it was something about working with my hands. My grandfather worked a full-time job during the day, and at night he would go and clean other buildings and do floors. And I would go with him at night. I would ride on top of the buffing machine with him, or the waxing machine when he was out doing these things. And I think something about that, I don't know if I transitioned in my mind that these were things that they did on their own, so they had control. But I do remember at about 12 or 13 years old, my grandfather getting an award at his job for X number of years of service, and I think he got a globe of the earth, and I want to say maybe a watch. And I remember thinking, wow, you have to wait this many years for a company to give you a watch. Can't you work for yourself and get your own watch?
Isn't that interesting? Yeah, I keep on using the word interesting because it really is. Now, let's move ahead again. So now you're a doctor. You're a doctor of what, philosophy, or a doctor of what? And tell us how you did that, because let me tell you, with all the things you're doing, going for your doctorate, where did you get the time? I think you make the time. You hear people say you make the time for the things that are important, so I'm going to say my name. I still get a tickle out of this. So, yes, I'm now Dr. Lisa Summerour, and I have a doctorate in education from Olivet Nazarene University with a focus in ethical leadership. Define that, please, ethical leadership.
It's leadership. Well, Olivet Nazarene University, first of all, is a Christian university, and the ethical leadership is very similar to organizational leadership, but we spend a lot of time looking at the ethical decision-making processes that happen in organizations or within individuals and organizations, and just learning to look at things from a little bit deeper level, so that we're looking at, are we doing the right thing for right now with the information that we have in front of us, and not just making decisions because it might be the best decision financially, or because it might just be good for a particular group, but is this the smartest thing that we could be doing for the whole? And so what I learned about ethics was there's no right answer sometimes that works across the board all the time. You really have to be dealing with what's happening in that particular moment.
Right. You know, that's an interesting thing, too, because you're talking about the things that kind of make you, in a sense, successful. Now, you're a successful trainer and a facilitator and an MC at various events. And in your bio, it says you effectively incorporated your training as a professional actor into becoming an engaging, informative, and authentically heartfelt experiences. So let's take a look at your training as a life coach. A lot of people hear the word life coach and they don't really know what that's about. So would you explain that?
Certainly. So I was actually trained with the masteries that are associated with the IAC. The IAC is the International Association of Coaching. So I went through several months of intensive training to learn the 9 masteries that are under the IAC, and I work under the code of ethics that is affiliated with the International Association of Coaching. So I've actually been trained to coach people. There are differences between a mentor and a coach, or a therapist and a coach. The difference for me, or how I describe coaching, and I do this for people in their personal lives and their professional lives, is I take someone from where they are now with the information that they've given me, and I'm there to help support them and guide them and encourage them to go from where they are to where they want to be. So it's all about progressing forward. I tell people if you're stuck in your past, if you've got issues with your parents, if you're still fighting about things that happened when you were a child, and that's keeping you from dealing with where you are now and keeping you from being able to move forward, then you might need a therapist. I'm not the person to I'm not the person to help you with there. I'm here to help get you from where you are to where it is you want to be.
But wait a minute, Lisa. Dr. Lisa, you think that you're not a therapist, but I'm sure that the people who go to your classes, they probably get a lot of information and also education about how to be successful and how to kind of solve some of their problems. That's kind of like a therapist. And I'm sure that a lot of people use you, even though you don't think you are. They use you as a therapist. But okay, let's just talk about now your company. Your company tagline or motto is Live, Empowered, Lead Your Best Self Forward. Okay, so what does that mean to you, and how does that tie in with the book that you've written, which is called Fortunes? Very interesting. Fortunes.
Well, I have to tell you, Susan, when I saw your V for Vitality, I got excited because I said this lines up so perfectly with Live Empowered, Lead Your Best Self Forward.
There you go.
Because it really is about strengthening yourself. It's about each individual knowing what's inside of them, tapping into that thing that's inside of them that makes them unique. So when I'm talking about coaching, I spend a lot of time coaching, asking questions, because I really do believe that most people have the answers inside of them. They just need somebody to help pull them out. So they have to learn to be self-directed in what it is they're going to do. They have to learn to lead themselves forward. I'm there as a guide. I'm there to kind of keep the questions coming. The Live Empowered, Lead Your Best Self Forward, that's exactly what that's about. It's empowering yourself by leading your best self. That means you've got to go inside and dig deep and do the work on yourself so that what you present and how you show up in the world is the best that you can be in that particular moment.
Okay, so wait a minute, Dr. Lisa. Here's another thought that I have, and that is that a lot of people are very confused, and especially younger people, because the competition in this world today is just incredibly, oh my God, how do I describe it? It's huge. And, a lot of young people, again, are self-directed. I mean, they know they have kind of a passion to do something, but they don't know what it is. Do our schools, do they train people or young people to do something special? And what is it, if you would explain to our audience, what is it that they really should do? What kind of process should they go through? What do you think about that?
Wow. Now, I'm thinking of a conversation. I heard Stedman Graham speak several years ago, because he does a lot of work with youth and helping them find their passion. And one of the things he said is if you can get a 12 or 13-year-old child to start investigating what are the things that you're interested in, what are the things that you just get pleasure out of doing, what are the things you do for other people that bring you joy. If you can figure that out at 12 or 13, imagine how much time it would save an individual going into adulthood, that they're not experimenting all over the place. Now, I don't say experimenting like we shouldn't be trying different things, because for me, obviously, with the variety of things I've done in my life, I'm probably the poster girl for try that.
Okay, you're right.
You can try that too. I don't know, I don't have the answer or the solution for what the school system needs to do. There's so many things going on in schools now that seem to be struggling and that they have their own challenges. I will say one of the principals that I know that I work with is at Riverside University High School, and Principal Harris is there doing a phenomenal job. And what he's doing is what I look at as a holistic approach to education, where he is tapping into not just celebrating them for their academic achievements, but he's looking at all of the creative aspects that the children bring. So whether it's the drama program or the robotics team or one of the athletics teams, those things are being highlighted, and the educational component is being highlighted and celebrated with the same fervor that the basketball team gets. Mm-hmm. And because of that, he is raising the consciousness of these children, these teenagers, and they're starting to feel more capable and confident, and that's an empowering thing. So I think that's one of the things that I've seen that works, and I would just say that, there are educators all over this country who are doing phenomenal jobs, and we just need to have more of them in more schools.
Mm-hmm. Now, right now we were just discussing young people. What about older people who have had careers in their life, and then suddenly they find themselves getting older, and then they say, well, how do I have a purpose? How do I do something that makes me want to wake up in the morning and feel I have a great day ahead of me? How would you empower them?
I don't think the process changes. I think you've got to be willing to go inside of yourself and ask yourself those questions and find out what are the things that I enjoy doing. I truly believe that each one of us has something inside of us. There's something inside of us that will not get put out into this world if we don't put it out there. So the world will always be missing whatever that light is that you were going to shine if you don't figure out what that thing is. And I think adults have to go through the same thing as a teenager would have to go through if you really feel that you haven't tapped into it, or perhaps you've lost it. And that may be a confidence issue. It may be a fear issue. But I do believe it's in there. And I think you have to get someone to help you with those questions, or you have to figure out a way to ask yourself those questions and be really honest about answering what it is. Because for some people, the fear of leaving wherever they are, doing whatever it is they're doing, keeps them from really pursuing the passion. Mm-hmm. And you've got to, you obviously you got to put food on the table, and you got to keep the lights on. So you may need to have a job that's not necessarily your passion, but you've got to realize that your purpose should be able to carry you through getting through that 40-hour-a-week job that maybe isn't something you're in love with, if on the outside you're finding ways to live out your passion as well.
Yeah. Now, there are quite a few companies, and I'm talking specifically about like hedge funds, all the companies that are centered around making money. You're talking about banks, you're talking about becoming brokers, again, hedge fund managers and so on, and jobs like that. Now, the young people who enter those fields, they have to know a lot about technology, and they are worked to the bone. They are spending about 12 hours, 14, 16 hours working for those companies. And I'm sure some of them like it a lot because it's about the money. And some of them, they're just getting burnt out. So the ones that are getting burnt out, when they come to you, what do you say to them?
I'm thinking of a client I had at one point who every time we spoke, she would tell me how much she hated her job. And it was the first thing that she sort of reminded me of each one of our sessions. She hated her job. And one day I said, quit your job. She said, well, I can't quit my job. And I said, of course you can. I said, every day this week somebody's going to wake up, they're going to go into the office, and they're going to quit their job. You could be one of them. And she said, but I can't quit. I said, well, tell me why you can't quit your job. Why do you think you can't quit your job? Well, this is helping to pay for my daughter's college tuition. Mm-hmm. This is the extra money to make sure that we can do that comfortably. I said, oh, so how does it make you feel when you think about paying for your daughter's college education? Mm-hmm. Oh, I feel great. My husband and I are so what happened there, I said, okay, I want you to think about what you just told me. If you're getting up every day, going someplace that you tell yourself you hate, you're creating cognitive dissonance. In other words, you're creating turmoil in your thinking. It's also extremely unhealthy. You're creating negative energy in your body that really does manifest itself into illnesses. Whole nother topic.
Right.
But why would you want to get up every day and tell yourself, yay, let's get up and go someplace that I hate, and then not understand why you just feel worse and worse as the weeks turn into months, turn into years? I said, now that you realize you have a purpose for going into that job every day, can you start thinking about that experience differently? And we went through a few more exercises where she was able to identify the things that she was actually getting from that job that were not only helping to pay for her daughter's college education, but that were benefiting her in her home-based business that she wouldn't have been able to afford to pay for on her own, but she was getting them because of her association with her day job. So sometimes you've got to be able to get yourself in a frame of mind to deal with, in a healthy way, the things that you're actually handling in your life right now so that they don't become a crisis for you. Right. And then you can continue to move forward into the things that you're passionate about. And now she's got a really successful home-based business that she spends a majority of her time doing, but she's not dealing with her day job like it's the miserable bane of her existence anymore.
Right. You know, there are so many people who are unhappy at their jobs, and I think that you're giving them the inspiration to understand and to do something about it. But let's move on because we only have a couple of moments. And
okay.
Let's just talk about your book. I want you to explain why your book. Why should people buy your book?
So it's called The Four Shuns, and that's TIONS. And that is sort of a code for preparation, presentation, documentation, and communication. And I co-wrote this book with Dr. Imad Rahim and attorney Richard Holloway. We were colleagues, and we put together our many years of experience. Dr. Rahim had been using some of these things in a vocational program, and he came to us one day and asked if we would help him turn it into a book. Attorney Holloway had experience working in the court systems and working with youth, and I had come from over 20 years of helping people with job searches and resume development and interview techniques. So we worked together to create a book that we sort of look at as a simple guide that somebody can pick up and just look at those 4 phases of preparing for a job search. How do you prepare? How are you going to present yourself? What documentation do you need? And how are you going to help get better communicating in those interview situations? And we're really fortunate that this little book right now has been distributed to 20 different countries through one of the online libraries that has it. And we've sold over 6,000 copies of it, and it's now being used in every introductory program at one of the online universities. So it's doing well. I'm in the process of actually writing a solo project that I'm going to use as a workbook so that people can actually, if they work in a facilitated guided program or if they want to do it on their own, what I want to do is make a connection to why they're doing the things that they're doing in terms of preparing, talking about wardrobe and talking about networking and some of the other aspects that still are associated with job search, but they're also associated with other things that people are going to use the rest of their lives as they move forward.
Now, what do you predict is going to happen to our workforce? Do you think that they're going to continue doing what they're doing now, which is, of course, technology-based companies and working for companies that just use technology to kind of, let's mention, like Microsoft or Apple or some of those companies. Is there something that you know that we don't know?
I don't think there's anything. I wish I'm tech. Let's see, how can I say this? I'm not technologically illiterate, but I'm not. My girlfriends would say I'm a techie. I don't feel that I am. One of the things that I can say is you're going to need to be technologically savvy to operate, moving forward. And I think everyone already knows that. I think the teenagers and preteens probably have a leg up on many of us adults.
Oh, yeah.
And that this is the only life that they know. And it's important because even in things like preparing your resume, you need to know what keywords, what that term means and what it means to make sure that you have certain words that are in your resume so that when a computer is reviewing your resume, which very often happens now before a human sees it, it picks up the keywords in your resume that are associated with the job that you're looking for. So there are reasons that are technologically based that people need to be aware of, and that's why it's important to go to a professional for your resume, to go to a professional, someone like me, for some training so that you can get some of the basic information and make sure that you're not putting yourself at a disadvantage very early in the game to the point where your resume isn't even getting seen.
Well, my guest today has been Dr. Summerour, and she's the CEO of Summerour and Associates, a consulting firm that helps individuals design successful strategies to move them towards their personal and professional goals. Now, she's got a book out there, and the book is now called The Four Shuns, with a very clever name, and that is THE4-TIONS. And I think everybody would be so particular book because it really has a lot of information that you need to empower you. So thank you very much, Dr. Summerour, for being on the Susan Brender Show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Susan Brender Show. To be a guest, email sebrender@yahoo.com.